What's up, people? I'm Shaggy, the opinionated hippie, continuing my deep dive into all things Neil Young. Today it's Dreamin' Man Live 92. If you're new to this channel or haven't watched in a while, I have blepharitis. This eye is all red. You don't want to look at it. Plus, it's still sensitive to the light, so sunglasses help indoors. Sorry about that if that bothers you. So what we have is a 2009 release of all the tracks on here, all 10 of them, are all of the tracks off his 1992 release, Harvest Moon. My previous video, which in real time was yesterday, was Unplugged, the one he did in 93, which contained some Harvest Moon tracks. And I complained that I really wished on those Harvest Moon tracks it was him solo acoustic, piano, guitar, ukulele, whatever, and didn't have a full band as he did. It was unplugged, but it was a full band. Well, voila, 16 years later, he drops this as one of his archive series releases. And it is all 10 tracks from Harvest Moon, as performed acoustic in 92 when he was touring in 92. The songs are not in the order of the album, so you get a different sequencing of the album. Don't think it's a particularly good sequencing of the album. And the songs, as he usually does in all his archive stuff, the first song, Dreamin' Man, is from an early show in January, I believe. And the last song, War of Man, is from a show in November. And so the songs themselves are chronological. So song 6 comes after song 4 in actual chronological time. And it's an interesting release. It is maybe not what I was expecting when it came out, because I really thought Neil would, I don't know, do more with these songs in an acoustic setting, but I didn't think this would be such a, I think dour is maybe too strong of a word, but it's a pretty, like, almost somber vibe to a lot of this stuff, and it doesn't really have much joy in it. And I think lyric-wise, it makes sense for some of these songs, like War of Man. Neil's attitude, Neil's performance works perfectly. Natural Beauty, perfect. And those are the last 2 songs on the album. But some of the other stuff, like One of These Days, to me, One of These Days is like, I don't know, there should be a little joy in One of These Days. And even even Dreamin' Man, which opens the album, I think this was a chance for Neil to put something a little different into it. And it feels there's a very melancholy vibe to a lot of this that kind of always surprises me when I listen to it. There's one track that definitely you can feel a little bit of joy in it, and I think it's when we'll get to it. It's like, oh yeah, that's cool. But I almost feel like there should be more joy in this thing. And I was excited when this came out because I absolutely love Harvest Moon. And while it wasn't one of those that I immediately loved, by the time 2009 rolled around, Harvest Moon was one of my, a top tier, S tier Neil album that gave me comfort and warmth, and I found solace in it, and I enjoyed listening to it. And my only complaint about that album really was like sort of there's this production sheen to it that kind of maybe robbed it a little bit of its edges. And listening to this, I'm like, oh no, I think I liked that production sheen because it gives it a little bit of this warmth and this comfort and this, like, when you're listening to songs like War of Man and Natural Beauty, in which the Amazon rainforest is devastated and he's reminding you of everything that's been lost, but you're still like, but the production is so nice that I'm okay listening to this stuff because of the way Neil's presenting it. So this is an interesting listen. Dreamin' Man opens it up, and it pretty much, I think it's a good opener. It sets the tone really, really well. It's being like, we're not going too high, we're not going too low, we're kind of right here in the middle with this. And it's even opens it up. The only time he talks on this whole thing before this, and then he says, thank you very much at the end or something along those lines. But he says, this is just a feeling. Don't take any of this literal, or none of it's literal. And then he plays Dreamin' Man. And unfortunately, that's not true for the whole album, because then you have War Man and Natural Beauty, and you have these things that are quite not literal. The Dissolution of a Marriage, and from Hank to Hendrix, that are more than just a feeling. But it's an interesting statement. It's the one statement he chose to include on this. So Dreamin' Man, I think, is a pretty good opener. Such a Woman follows next, which I think is my least favorite song on the actual album. I like it here. It's the only song with piano. Everything else is either a ukulele or a guitar. But I don't think it works as a second song. It needs to be like fourth or fifth, or I would say the penultimate song. Or maybe even if you're gonna have Natural Beauty, War a Man, like get a Such a Woman into Natural Beauty into War a Man. It's a pretty heavy threesome to close out, but I think it's pretty strong. Also, I think going acoustic, guitar, piano, and then nothing but guitar until you hit a ukulele. I think the piano should have come somewhere different. I just think it hurts the flow of the album. But I like this version better. There's no strings. It's just piano. I think everything about the song just feels a little more connected to Neil and a little more personal. So while I like this version, I do wish the sequencing was a little bit different. One of These Days comes next. One of my favorite songs on the album. I think there needs to be more joy in this. It just seems almost like he's resigned to the fact that one of these days he's going to write this long letter. Wherein like the album version, it's like, no, one of these days I'm going to do this, man. Like there's a determination to this. Like I'm going to get this done instead of like, yeah, I'll do it one of these days. Or at least that's the vibe I'm getting from him. Maybe I just want something different. Harvest Moon, like hearing this solo. This is one on the album. I think the full instrumentation helps us a little better. When I was listening to Unplugged, I was like, man, I'd like to hear him do this solo acoustic. And I think his vibe on Unplugged, which was recorded the following year, is different than his vibe on here. So I think that would have been a different performance. But this Harvest Moon does not hit me as strong as the one on the album. The production on that, just the overall overwhelming, just kind of glossiness of it, I think helps this song in particular. It's such a peaceful, swaying song. I think some of that joy of the song just seems like he's going for a different vibe. But then we get You and Me, which I think works great solo acoustic. It opens up with what it sounds to me like the Tangled Up in Blue riff from Blood on the Tracks, but not the officially released version, but the alternate version where it's like that little chord progression, and then it goes into what sounds like an old man chord progression. I think the You and Me sounds much better. Then we get it From Hank to Hendrix, which I like this version. I can take either one, but I like this solo acoustic version. And then the one song where I feel like, oh, Neil sounds really happy right now is Unknown Legend. And that's the song about his wife. And you can feel that love and you can feel that joy. And it's like palpable. And it's like, all right, maybe by this point in the tour, like I think this is, this is still September, which is where the bulk of these songs are from. So, but there's something where like, oh yeah, he's feeling this one. There's joy in this one. So we know it's in Neil. He just needed the right sort of, From Hank to Hendrix is about a, marriage breaking up at some point. But Unknown Legend, I think it's like the true, as far as like vibe goes, the shining moment on this album. Maybe it needed to come earlier. Maybe he could have found a version from like the night before, because this is from the 22nd, I believe, September. The other ones are from September 21st. Find a September 21st version, put it sooner in the album so we get that burst of joy. But I really like the Unknown Legend. Old King follows. Banjo, yes, 100%, sounds great. When he starts singing the song, he's got this little hokey little, because it's about my dog who just passed away, and it's like, Old King. It doesn't fit. Like, I think for some reason on the album it fits. Here, it stands out. It hurts the flow. I think sequencing wise, if you had gone like Dreamin' Man, maybe like a One of These Days or From Hank to Hendrix, and then an Old King, put that earlier, because after Old King, you got Natural Beauty and War of Man, which are just like a 1-2 punch that knock you out and leave you like exhausted, and then the album ends. But Old King almost feels too light, too irreverent, too not of the vibe. And it works kind of well with the pairing of Unknown Legend, because Unknown Legend is happy and upbeat, and it's about his wife. And then Old King is kind of banjo and upbeat, and it's about his dog who recently passed away. But either it's his performance in this and the banjo hokiness of the lyrics, or there is something about Old King that to me on this just stands out as like it doesn't fit. Maybe that's a sequencing issue. Maybe if it had gone earlier, it would work better. But yeah, to me, whatever. And then we get Natural Beauty, which is just a devastating song. It's a beautiful song. Your long, epic 11-minute Neil acoustic, just lyrically talking about how we need to protect nature. And it's just sad because, especially here in the United States, when we currently have a bunch of people running the country who are defunding everything we have that protects nature, and like we're losing natural parks and they're no longer staffed and you can no longer visit them because they don't have people to man them, and like our natural beauty is going to be gone, and it's devastating. And this was written 32 years ago, and it's probably exponentially worse now. It's a hard song to listen to. He specifically mentions the Amazon, which is, I think there's been a much more successful maybe fight to save parts of it. We need that fight here, or we're going to lose some of the most beautiful places on this planet. I like the studio version, or not the studio version, but I like the album version of this better. I don't know if it's a post-production ad or it was just played differently, but I don't think so because it's the same tour. But there is this weird, like, I don't know if it's a synth percussive element, but there is this like nice little percussive element that seems to be there, and it's probably added in post. I like it. I think it works. I think it helps add to the ambiance of this song and the sort of naturalness of the song. But I still think Neil and a guitar and a long journey and lots of lyrics is just like musical heaven. And then we close out with a War of Man, kind of nicely stretched out, kind of devastating. He's nailing this. The mood, it seems like almost the entire mood of this album is meant to like lead us right into these last two songs so that when we get here, it's not like the carpet's pulled out from under us and we end up on our butt going, whoa, where'd that come from? Like we're kind of prepared for it by the time we get here. But War of Man, it's a great, great ending. I love this version. But yeah, it's an interesting album. It's like close to an hour long. A couple of songs are slightly stretched out. But it's not, other than Unknown Legend and the kind of somewhat silly Old King, it's a pretty intense album. And I don't know if dour is the right word, but that's always the word I want to reach for. There's a dour percentage on here that is a little too high for my tastes. And I don't know why. I was expecting something more for just Neil and a guitar or Neil and a piano with these songs. And, I don't know. Yeah. So it's an interesting listen. And I would say comparing this to the actual studio album, there's an intensity to this that the studio album lacks. But I think maybe that's why I like the studio album is he flirts with that intensity, but ultimately pulls back and like makes it a little bit softer. And I think sometimes Neil needs to do that because he can be really intense, and especially after the Ragged Glory, Weld, Arc, Noise, Chaos. I think Harvest Moon was just like, yeah, this is good. It's like a sherbet after a really spicy meal. You're like, I just need that to like coat my inside. So, things are just not as crazy, fire-wise as they otherwise would be. But yeah, it's an interesting album. I mean, it's a good album. I'm glad I have it. But yeah. At some point, when I'm done with every single live release, I will rank all of them. But this is, somewhere towards the middle, maybe even the bottom middle at this point. I don't know how I feel about this one. It always confuses me because it's exactly what I wanted, but I'm not sure I wanted this version of what Neil was bringing. So it's an interesting release. Dreamin' Man, Live 92. I mean, check it out if you like Harvest Moon. It's definitely worth listening to. Would love to hear some differing opinions on this. But yeah. All right. That's all I got. Subscribe, like, share, comment, do all those things. Thanks for watching. Peace. Talk to you later.